Okay, so we did our expose presentation on the French Revolution and all of the impacts that it had. So presenting today is myself, Isabel, Gia, and William. Okay, so what led to the revolution? There were three main factors. There was the state system, Enlightenment philosophers, and the inspiration of the American Revolution. Starting off with absolutism, the state system, King Louis was a king at the time. He held absolute power, known as absolutism. There was an emphasis on high society always having their needs adequately met. However, the lower class had very poor living conditions and never got a say in anything political, and like often like left starving. The state system was implemented and consisted of three levels. People were placed in the system upon birth. The first estate was made up of the Catholic clergy paying no taxes. The second estate was made up of noble people and was less than 2% of the population. They also paid no taxes and were exempt of doing work for the government. And the third estate, which is where most of the population fell, ranging from free peasants to middle class people, and they had to pay taxes to support the other estates, and they had no say in the government. Next, the next factor was enlightenment. There were new ideas of society and government management circulating. Enlightenment philosophers are who promoted these ideas. They were using logical reasoning and science, backing up overthrowing traditional values. Enlightenment thinkers wanted equality, different government management, and democracy. So, like all this stirred up people wanting to rally for a change in the government, thus leading to the revolution. And pictured here is John Locke, a very influential philosopher at the time. The next factor was the American Revolution and the inspiration of it. People of France took inspiration from the US gaining independence from Britain. So like, they saw this as an example of how a country could be a republic and not a monarchy. And then pictured here on the slide is like the signing of the Declaration of Independence, which is like where they got their inspiration from.
Okay, so the history of the French Revolution is what we'll be talking about next, specifically the National Assembly, the Reign of Terror, and the Thermidorian Reaction. The National Assembly was the new government set up by the French Revolution in the summer of 1789, starting June 14th to July 9th, 1789. Within a few years, deputies debated a new constitution for France. Many representatives of the clergy joined the assembly to show their anger against the expanding monarchy of Louis XVI. He was the last king of France before the fall of the monarchy during the French Revolution. The Reign of Terror was a 10-month period in which suspected enemies were guillotined by thousands. A group led by Robespierre took over the government, then started the Reign of Terror as a form of rivalry. Robespierre believed these violent acts were necessary to unify France against the threat of the First Coalition. Once this failed, the National Assembly turned against Robespierre in the Thermidorian Reaction. The Thermidorian Reaction symbolized the end to terror and dismantling of the machinery which was used from July 1794 to May 1795. This represented a return to moderation in the earlier principles of the revolution. The death of Robespierre led to the Napoleonic era, where France would come to dominate much of the continental Europe. On August 22nd, 1795, the National Convention approved a new constitution that created the first bicameral legislature of France.
The French Revolution forever changed French society. While the effects are numerous, the three that are addressed in this presentation are the effects on theocratic rule, personal liberty, and military expansion. Prior to the French Revolution, clergy of the Catholic Church were important members of the Estates General. Less powerful than their aristocratic counterparts, the corrupt clergy would support legislation that would benefit the nobles at the expense of the commoners, receiving land, power, and salaries in return. After the Revolution, though, the Catholic Church served at a much lower status than before. Elimination of the feudal system and separation of church and state saw the clergy stripped of all benefits they had previously enjoyed. Their salaries and land were confiscated, but more importantly, they lost their influence on government affairs. Similar to the United States post-revolution, individual freedom and equality took precedence over religious influence. As the revolution brought about the end of theocratic rule, it also encouraged the desire for universal equality and liberty. This desire became reality after 1804 when Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte established the Napoleonic Code. With precedent set that all men are equal, hereditary nobility and class privilege were extinguished. All citizens were subject to taxes and followed the same laws, which included the right to protection of property and the outlawing of slave labor. While these laws were groundbreaking for the French, in reality, not much had changed. Like in the United States, these laws were applicable only to white men. Women still had no rights, and racial minorities were subject to harsh discrimination. While slavery was outlawed in mainland France, slave labor was still legal in the French colonies. With liberty and equality finally a guaranteed right, the nation was more united than it had ever been. Under the leadership of Napoleon, France set its sight on spreading its liberal ideas through international conquest. From 1800 to 1815, Napoleon conquered almost all of Europe, absorbing Belgium, Holland, and parts of Germany and Italy into an enlarged France. Other nations, such as Spain, became puppet nations ruled by the Bonaparte family. Britain was the only non-Balkan country able to resist the French Empire until its collapse in 1814. While France lost most of the territories it had gained prior to said collapse, their introduction of the Napoleonic Code left a lasting impact in Europe, attributing heavily to the end of European monarchic rule. With the French conquest resembling the United States doctrine of manifest destiny, the continent of Europe was forever changed. Now we will go over our opinions on the topic of the French Revolution, starting with Isabel.
La Révolution française a été très violente alors qu'elle n'était pas nécessaire, mais c'est un tournant très important. Il fallait que cela se produise pour qu'un grand changement soit apporté. Dans le somme, l'indépendance et la liberté qui en découlaient étaient bonnes.
Next, you will hear from Gia.
Je crois que la Révolution française a eu grand résultat. Le but était de créer une vie meilleure pour les Français, donc la violence a fini par payer. Bien que je n'ai souhaité jamais cela à personne, je pense que était une guerre réussie.
Lastly, you will hear my opinion. À mon opinion, je pense que la Révolution française est très importante pour les mondiaux. Les gens de France voulaient une vie meilleure et travaillent pour ça. Alors qu'ils ne pensent pas que la violence était bonne, je comprends qu'elle était nécessaire. Enfin, je pense que les Français et les Américains étaient similaires dans leurs désirs. That concludes our presentation. Over the next two slides, which we will leave open for 20 seconds, you will see our post-presentation quiz and you will see the reflection question we have. Thank you and have a nice day.